When I was young, maybe around 8 or so, my sister and I spent an evening playing games in her room. We were watching the snowfall outside and sipping hot chocolate as well. We were in her bedroom that night as the snowstorm outside, though not violent, was windy, and her bedroom had better heating than mine in our drafty house. It was winter break, so our father allowed us to stay up late because we didn't have school the next day. The house we lived in was a 2-story single-family house with a modest backyard surrounded by a short chain-link fence that was lined with shrubbery on the exterior. My sister's room was on the 2nd floor and overlooked the backyard, and my room was across the hallway, overlooking the front of the house. As we were playing games in which I was thoroughly winning, we heard movement above us. Footsteps above us made a particular crack and crunch noise, as there is a lot of snow on the roof of the house. The stride was long but not rushed. I remember both of us getting very unnerved and having the idea of going outside to look at the roof. The footsteps sounded again, walking now towards the back of the house. My father, who had been downstairs watching TV, came upstairs and asked us if we heard that. We said yes, and I told him it sounded like hooves. Immediately, my father rushed to the window and closed the blinds. He gave us very specific instructions to not look outside, not go outside, and not to open any of the windows or doors. He then migrated us downstairs to sleep in the living room. Several hours later, I woke up. Unlike my sister, I didn't like sleeping downstairs, so I gathered my blanket and headed up to my bedroom. It was bitterly cold up there. Though my father had drawn the blinds around the entire house, he had forgotten my bedroom. My window overlooked a small section of the roof above the front of the house. I approached the window, intent on completing the work he hadn't done of closing the blinds. Then I stopped. There were indentations in the snow covering that section of the roof. I can't remember how many, but I remember counting. They were wide, semicircular with a slight oval shape. They started at the furthest exterior part of the roof and proceeded towards my window. As I stood in the window, I became suddenly aware of how dark and cold it was. For some reason, I badly wanted to open the window instead of closing the blinds. I was, though at the time, a very obedient child. I backed away from the window, shut my bedroom door, and went into my sister's room. It was less cold there. I spread my blanket down near the radiator and had an urge or a thought. I felt compelled. I wanted so badly to go outside or go downstairs and open the back door. I was afraid of my father and what he would do to me if he found out that I had disobeyed his order, though. But he wouldn't know if I just took a peek outside. I went over to my sister's window and drew down one of the slats of the blinds. The prints from the roof were also in the backyard. They led from the house towards the fence and stopped at the bushes. In the bushes, there was a figure crouching. It was crouching, but still its head poked above the bushes and fence. It watched me watch it. It was wearing a hood, and its face was long. It was too long, shaped to be a human face. It looked more like a snout or a beak or something of that nature. It was so long and white as the snow that was covering the whole backyard. And I so badly had this urge again, and I wanted to open the window and walk out into the snowstorm. But I didn't, and I closed the blinds instead. I sat down next to the radiator and cried myself to sleep. I was too scared to tell my dad the next day, mainly because I had broken his rule not to look outside that night. Years later, I debate myself about what I saw. If it was someone playing a prank on us, or something strange that I didn't understand at the time. This is something that happened to me over a decade ago, back when I was still a freshman in high school. My family had just moved from the city out to the suburbs, and I was having a difficult time adjusting. As a result, I was quite a troublemaker. I was never a big fan of school. I was always a few years ahead of my classes, and as a result, I never really bothered myself with doing homework or even attending my classes. Often, I would skip out of classes and just go have fun. On this day, it was cold outside, and there was a snowstorm coming in. I skipped out on the last few hours of school and was on my way home, not wanting to get caught outside in the weather. There was a shortcut that I sometimes took that led through a pocket of the woods. It was very seldom that I did this, as I always had an inexplicable fear of the woods. This time, there was another person out there leaning against a tree and smoking cigarettes. He was a very heavy person and appeared to be around the same age as me. For some odd reason, he was wearing shorts and a t-shirt, even though it was cold. Now, I wasn't a very social person, and I had no intention of saying anything to him. Unfortunately, as I walked by, he began to walk with me. I stopped and asked him what he was doing. He explained that it was cold outside, and since he couldn't go home at the moment, he thought he would just come with me wherever I was going. This was very troubling to me, and I tried to explain to him that he couldn't come with me and that his behavior wasn't okay. He seemed to accept it, and I continued on my way, making it home without incident. It snowed hard that evening and night, leaving several inches on the ground. This is where things started to get weird. The following morning, when my stepdad arrived home from work, he came to wake me up and asked me to come out to the front yard with him. When I did, I was startled to see that there were footprints in the snow leading from the sidewalk to the side of our house, stopping right under my bedroom window. Thankfully, my room was on the second floor and nobody would have been able to see inside, but I was still upset about it. The next night, I was in my room playing video games. It was nearly midnight when something struck my window, scaring the crap out of me. I got up and looked outside and saw the kid from the woods staring up at me. At this point, I went to get my brother, as I didn't want to go outside alone to confront him. We went outside, and the kid was still there. I asked him what he was doing at my house in the middle of the night, and he said he thought we could hang out. I asked him how he knew where I lived, and he was quiet. I pressed him a few more times about it, and finally got him to admit that he'd followed me home the day before. Then I asked him how he knew which room was mine, and his answer was terrifying. The previous night, my whole family had gone out to the grocery store and picked my younger brother up. During the time we'd been gone, he said he'd entered our house using the spare key hidden in the backyard. He knew my room because I had changed, and he recognized the dirty clothes in my room that I had been wearing when I first encountered him in the woods. I told my brother to run in and grab the phone and call the police, and this creep took off running. I wasn't about to chase him, so we just called the cops and told them the whole story about what had happened. The cop that talked to us knew exactly who this person was after we described him, and what he told us added yet another layer of terror to the story. I found out that this person was not a kid at all, but a man in his mid-20s. He'd been accused of this type of behavior several times before, and he'd even been arrested and charged several times for stalking people and for entering their homes without permission. I never saw the guy again. But there's one more thing that could be related. We had a family cat at the time, and shortly after this encounter, he went missing. We'd had him for years, and he'd never run off or even left the backyard when we let him out. The reason I mention this is because a good friend of mine had also encountered this man before and went through a similar terrifying experience with him. Her cat had also gone missing around the time of her encounter with the guy, but what happened to her was far more disturbing. Her cat was gone for a few days, then showed up in their yard dead. Its neck had been snapped. I'll never have any proof that this guy harmed our pet, and I don't believe he was ever caught or punished for the report that my brother and I made. Years later, though, I saw an arrest record for him online. He had been charged with several disturbing crimes. I can't put into words how thankful I am that my family and I made it out of that situation unharmed. This happened back when I was 19 years old. I was living in Vermont on a mountain away from home and working as a student on a massive horse breeding farm. It was February and obviously very snowy. We left a multiple-day out-of-state event in the evening to head back to the farm. I was driving my own car with a new sales rep as a passenger. We were both women, and she was maybe 25 or so. The other working students were riding with the boss on the big rig or with another who was driving her van. We convoyed with everyone else until about 12 a.m. when the trailer had an issue. We had encountered snowfall all night as there was a blizzard going on, but it was now getting bad around that time and area. The boss told me and the sales rep to keep going so that we could make it back for morning chores in case they didn't. The barn manager was the only one who stayed back at the farm. She would have left earlier in the day, though, as she was anticipating us back that night. Around 3 a.m., me and the sales rep reached the back rows to get up to the mountain to the farm. At that point, there was about 4 inches of snow on the roads. We kept having trouble getting up the hills and tried every route we could think of. I didn't have a lot of gas left, and we were tired and getting nervous. The sales rep suggested another route she thought she knew, and I figured why not, and tried it out. I had never been that way because I would simply drive the same way down the mountain every time to go to town on my day off. We got far on this other road, but the snow was still falling and I was having trouble with the hill again. At this time, we saw a house where houses were extremely far and few between in that area, and I was able to pull into the bottom of the driveway. It looked like they had a truck up there, and there was a light in a window. So, we decided that we should knock and ask them if they could drive us to the farm. This sounds strange, but everyone in that area knew of the farm, and the boss had been there forever and seemed to know everyone personally. Plus, we were together, so we figured it would be okay, and it would hopefully be a nice man that knew our boss. Of course, this is where things got weird. We were walking up and suddenly a dog started viciously barking and lunging at the end of the very short, heavy chain, which was attached to a tree in a blizzard at night. This startled us, and obviously we didn't like it on an ethical level. But the house was only a few yards away now, so we sprinted to it. We got up to the door, and right as the sales rep was about to knock, I grabbed her hand to stop her from knocking. Now that we were up close and not chatting or dealing with the scary dog, I noticed the door was only a piece of plywood on hinges, and the little house was a crappy-looking shack. Basically, they built their own permanent shelter, but didn't have the skills to do it nicely. Meanwhile, the dog was still barking and lunging on the chain. She now saw what I saw, and we decided to back away, and then ended up running to the car, because it was just one of those redneck properties that you imagine wouldn't appreciate visitors. It snapped us back into our senses that there could be multiple men inside, or someone dangerous, especially considering the dog situation. I managed to drive up that hill that was giving me trouble before. But as we continued down the road, we realized the sales rep had been wrong, and the road we took was a dead end. We came to a well-kept little farm, and the road ended right after. The sun was starting to come up now as well. We left the car on the road and walked up to the house, which wasn't set far back at all. We knocked endlessly, and no one answered. Just as we started to walk back to the car, the sales rep spotted something running up the road. It was the dog from earlier. We ran to the car and got in just in time for the dog to jump around the outside of my car, biting the mirrors and whatever it could get a hold of like it was deranged. I have been around and worked with dogs before, and I have never seen one in person as aggressive as the one we encountered. We got out of there, and I drove as fast as safely as I could away from the dog. As we passed by the shack in their driveway again on the way back, there was a crazy-looking man out there shaking his fist and yelling at us. We continued by and didn't stop to confront him, as he was very angry and pointing at us and yelling. When we got stuck on the next hill, we simply parked at the end of another driveway and sat there. My gas light was on, and we were using the battery to run the heat. We were completely delirious, just laughing and crying while keeping on the lookout for the dog or the crazy man. Eventually, around 6:30 a.m., we saw a plow truck coming and got out to flag it down. He knew our boss and gladly plowed our way home. I really do believe that the angry man sicked his dog on us because the chain was so heavy and we were almost a mile up the road when he got to us. There was no way it could have escaped on its own. We had also been looking at the mirrors as we left the shack because we were so freaked out already about the place, and the dog was still tied up. Whether they thought they were going to break in or were just mad that somebody came up to the driveway, I'll never know. In the early 90s, I went to school in upstate New York. This college town was built around a beautiful lake, and because of that, when summer came to an end, everything was closed with it. The area basically turned into a barren ghost town in the winter. We had nothing to do, and one of my housemates was a weed dealer, which was convenient for me as I was a chronic stoner at the time. We would make these elaborate dinners where every course featured weed in the recipe. The results of these dinners were stoned minds and a huge mess to clean up. Our dinners quickly became something that other college students from other houses wanted to get in on. So, we would have guests over, and the rule was that they had to clean up the dishes after the meal. Somehow, they didn't mind, and our house quickly became the house that everyone wanted to hang out at. One dark, cold, and windy night, we had 4 female guests from another school over at our house for one of these dinners. This was a weekend night, and when it came time to leave at night, the girls' car wouldn't start. Naturally, They came knocking on my door as I was the only one with a car. It was around midnight now, and they lived a good hour away, but I reluctantly agreed to take them. My housemate James agreed to come with me. There were no streetlights, and it was dark and cold out that night. And on top of that, it began to snow lightly, and then eventually it turned into a snowstorm. On a good day, we hardly knew where we were going around our town, and now I was driving in a totally different area. It was a tense, white-knuckle ride the whole time, but eventually we got there. The house where they lived was a converted estate with a long driveway and huge iron gates. As I turned into the driveway, the snow was really coming down. We could see two dull red lights off in the distance. As we got closer, we saw that it was not a car, but an elaborate stagecoach lumbering through the snow. As we went to overtake it on the road, we all looked over and saw that it was a huge black stagecoach being pulled by a team of black horses. The red lights we saw were lanterns on its sides. The driver was also dressed in black, sitting straight up and looking straight ahead. He didn't even glance at us as we passed by. Everyone in the car saw this. We asked the girls if this was a common thing where they lived, but they said no, and they had never seen anything like it before. At the time, we just thought it was very strange. Like, why would someone be out in a stagecoach after midnight in a snowstorm? I remember thinking that maybe this is how people traveled in the area. It didn't occur to us right away that it could be anything else. After we dropped them off at the house, we turned around to leave. Both of us fully expected to see that stagecoach again, as the girls' house was the only thing at the end of that road. Instead, we saw nothing. No horses, no hoofprints, no other tracks out but our own from coming the other way. At that point, it finally dawned on us both. No doubt a delayed reaction from dinner. James and I realized that we may have just seen not only a ghost, but also ghost horses and a ghost stagecoach. It's been more than 30 years, and anytime I see James, we still talk about what we saw that night. This happened during a cold snap one winter, when our city got a significant dumping of snow and temperatures plummeted to below zero. The neighborhood I lived in back then was a rough area. I would hear gunshots on a weekly basis. So despite loving walks at night, since I'm a woman without a large dog, I would never go. That was until the night of the blizzard. There was about 8 inches of snow on the ground, and the city was so underprepared, they weren't bothering to plow the neighborhoods yet. Combined with the extreme temperature, I figured it would be safe to go out, though I did call up a local friend to walk with me. We had a great time and had that beautiful, sparkling, silent world pretty much completely to ourselves. Combined with the COVID pandemic at the time, the snowstorm and it being late at night, there was literally no one driving on the roads. So, when a white car with a dent in the back went past us after my friend's feet couldn't take it anymore and were walking back, it was extremely noticeable. Closer to our respective houses, we parted ways. Only 3 more blocks to go for me. That's when the white car drove past me again from behind, extremely slowly. But I just knew the slow speed wasn't only from the snow. I was on instant high alert and started sweating despite the cold. The car would have to turn around to come back past me on a side street, no less, and conditions were so bad that it just didn't make sense. I was on their right, but quickly crossed behind them to the left, closer to home. They came to an even slower stop about 20 feet ahead of me in the very center of the unclear road and idled. Then a man got out from the passenger side and casually crossed over to the driver's side and acted like he was going to lean on it as I approached. But my instincts were screaming, and I took off at a slipping sprint down the untouched alley that was thankfully between me and the car. The snow was my savior, since they couldn't turn around, and a regular car would have almost certainly gotten stuck in that alley if they tried to follow me. The man immediately shouted something after me. He said, "Hey, we're not going to hurt you," but pretty much negated it by getting back in the car and driving off. So, not even sub-zero temperatures will deter creeps from looking for victims.